This podcast is brought to you by the American Enterprise Institute.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, review, and share.
Thanks for listening. Here's our show.
What in the hell's going on?
What the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on?
I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
You don't have to know what the hell is on it.
What the hell's the matter with these guys?
We don't know what's going on.
What the hell's going on?
Who in God's name knows what it's all about?
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
And I'm Mark Thiessen.
Welcome to our podcast, What the Hell is Going On? Mark, what the hell is extra this week?
Well, what the hell is extra? We're doing our regular series, What the Hell Did I Write This Week? And What the Hell I Wrote was an article basically arguing that, the Democrats are wrapping Project 2025 around Donald Trump's neck, and he had nothing to do with it. He wasn't involved in it. He's disavowed it, but they're running campaign ads. No one pushed back on Kamala Harris during the debate when she said that he wants to impose Project 2025 on the American people. But nobody seems to care about Project 2019.
And tell us, what is that?
Which is the radical left-wing agenda that Kamala Harris laid out for her campaign for president 4 years ago. And why is it that Donald Trump is responsible for every crazy thing that the Heritage Foundation says, but Kamala Harris just skates on all the things that we have her on video, in her own words, saying that she would do if she was elected president of the United States? This seems to be slightly unfair.
Mark, you don't understand. She has matured in office. She
Yes.
has grown in her understanding. She
Yes.
now no longer wants to ban fracking, ban the police, ban deportation, open the border, and end our nation as we know it.
Yep.
She's grown. And Mark, did she do any of those things when she was vice president, attending funerals and watching the border from far away? Did she do any of those bad things? No, she didn't, she keeps telling us, and therefore you can trust her.
Yep. But we can't trust Donald Trump to not impose the crazy ideas that Kevin Roberts and the Heritage Foundation have assembled for his campaign. By the way, can I say as an aside, it hasn't come out yet, but I've published my initial interview with Trump I was at Mar-a-Lago the day after the assassination attempt, and he canceled all of his other interviews except for mine. He was very gracious, and he spent about 3 hours with me and with Pam, who came with me to see him. And we have an interview coming up, but it was the day after his assassination attempt. And did he want to talk about that? No. Did he want to talk about other things? No. The first thing he brought up was the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. He is so mad about this project. He said, and they were interviewing people for jobs. And he said, I called up the head of the group. He didn't even remember his name. The head of the group. And I was like, Kevin Roberts. And he said, yeah. And I told him, who the hell do you think you are? He just railed on him. And, he said, I've disavowed it. And they're lying people. So they're running ads about this thing. And he said, this stuff like this can ruin a campaign. So if he
really?
Yeah. If he wins, I would hope that if you submitted your resume to the resume bank of the Heritage Foundation, you might want to ask them to delete your file and submit it in a different direction, because he does not like the Heritage Foundation.
Well, look, this is sort of Washington officiousness at its worst. But I have two questions for you, and I'm willing to bet that you either take the fifth on the first one or don't know the answer. And then another political question, and then I want you to share the article with us. But the first question, you and I talked about this offline. Karl Rove, when we had him on, and we both love Karl, said that he thought that the Democrats' attacks on Project 2025 were the kind of thing that the vast mass of Americans just don't give a damn about, aren't interested in. It's not swaying votes. It's just one of those things that people who have already decided on the left coast and here in elitistan East Coast, that those are the people who are interested in this and no one else. You said you didn't think that was right.
Yeah. So first of all, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Karl Rove. And normally he would be right, except in this particular case, I think if the Democrats didn't think that it was moving numbers for them or having an impact, they wouldn't be doing multi-million-dollar ad buys on it. They wouldn't be mentioning it in every stump speech. Project 2025 has become shorthand, even for people who haven't read it, and most people haven't, for shorthand for Trump's radical agenda. And they say, he was so dumb, he put it on paper. How can you believe they put it on paper? Which of course he didn't. And, the reason why they are hammering Project 2025 is because the polls show that Donald Trump owns the center of the political center in America right now. The New York Times Siena poll that just came out showed that 49% of Americans think he's neither too far left nor too far right, whereas 47% plurality say Kamala Harris is too far to the left. So, and 52% say she's a risky choice. So she wants to paint Trump as the risky extremist, but right now she is seen as the risky extremist. In Project 2025, it sounds nefarious. You don't have to know who the hell the Heritage Foundation is. It's just this secret plan, Project 2025. And I saw a poll somewhere, I can't remember which one it was, that something like more than 40% of Americans have heard of it. So they're getting penetration on it, and it's serving so normally if AEI put out a report and 40% of the American people knew about it, we'd be damn happy. But we wouldn't be happy if the leading candidate for president was really, really mad at us like he is at Heritage.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the second question, the harder one for you, is so I seem to recall that J.D. Vance wrote the introduction to Project 2025, which does give some credence to the accusers when they say that this is a familiar document to the Trump-Vance ticket. Did you ask President Trump about that?
I did. And he said, I didn't know that.
Do you remember Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon? This is really aging both of us, or I guess mostly me. Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon used to do that, and Johnny would say something, and Ed McMahon would go, really? I did not know that.
That's, it was sort of like that. But, yeah. I don't know if that's true.
I guess that's a good way of saying no comment.
I don't know if he was just saying that to deflect the conversation. But look, J.D. Vance has been a albatross around Donald Trump's neck since the moment he picked him. He hasn't bought him any new votes, and he's offended a lot of people. And if he wins, it will not be because of J.D. Vance. It will be in spite of J.D. Vance.
No, you are totally right about that. The state that you and I both live in, Virginia, actually began early voting just day before yesterday, I think, or maybe even yesterday. And I was thinking, wow, would I go and vote? Could I vote for Trump? Could I? And then I thought, oh no, I forgot J.D. Vance. Oh yeah, J.D. Vance, who sat down again with Tucker Carlson, and just unnecessary self-owning, unnecessary, Anyway, I want to hear your article because we're not here to talk about Tucker and J.D. as much as I find them gross. We are here to talk about Kamala and her rather shocking ideas. Go to it. Your piece is called Trump Disavowed Project 2025, but Harris still owns her Project 2019.
Here's my column. At last week's debate, Vice President Kamala Harris warned that Donald Trump, quote, has a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that he intends on implementing if he were elected again. Project 2025 is the subject of an ad blitz from the Harris campaign. It was also the centerpiece of her convention address and remains a refrain in her stump speech. I can't believe they put that thing in writing, she said. Here's the problem. Trump didn't put it in writing. The Heritage Foundation did. It's a policy wish list dreamed up by conservative activists, some associated with Trump, but many of them not, and Trump has repeatedly repudiated it. They know it's been disavowed, trolled Trump me in an interview at Mar-a-Lago this week, but they have ads about it because they're lying people. Vice presidential nominee Tim Walz at the Democratic convention said, they spend a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know that when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're gonna use it. Well, then let's look at Harris's own radical policy playbook, the extreme left-wing policy she campaigned on when she ran for president 4 years ago. Call it Project 2019. Unlike Project 2025, which Trump has never embraced, Harris is on record as having supported the following Project 2019 policies. Number 1, banning the sale of gas-powered cars. In April 2019, Harris co-sponsored the Zero Emission Vehicles Act in the Senate, which would have banned the sale of gas-powered vehicles by 2040. Then, during her 2019 campaign, Harris promised to implement an accelerated model of the act that would move that target ahead to 2035. Number 2, a federal ban on fracking. At CNN's September 2019 town hall on the climate crisis, Harris declared, quote, "There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking," unquote. She pledged to end fossil fuel leases on public lands as well as offshore drilling, and to weaponize her Justice Department to go after oil and gas companies that have directly impacted global warming, telling the audience she will, quote, "take them to court and sue them," unquote. Number 3, ending private health insurance. In 2017, she was the first Democrat to co-sponsor Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All Act, which would have abolished private health insurance and replaced it with a government-run single-payer system. In 2019, she reaffirmed that position. Asked by CNN's Jake Tapper at a January 2019 town hall whether she would, quote, "totally eliminate private insurance," unquote, Harris said yes. Quote, "The idea is everyone gets access to medical care and you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval," she told Tapper, adding, quote, "let's eliminate all that. Let's move on," unquote. Number 4, the Green New Deal. In 2019, Harris co-sponsored the Radical Green New Deal. As a candidate, she unveiled her own plan to spend $10 trillion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, with a goal of getting to a carbon-neutral economy by 2045. And she vowed to ram it through the Senate with a simple majority, declaring on CNN, quote, "If they fail to act as President of the United States, I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal." Number 5, decriminalizing illegal border crossings. In 2019, Harris raised her hand during a Democratic debate when asked if she supported decriminalizing border crossings. In an interview the same year, she declared, quote, "I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented and cross the border as criminals," unquote. Number 6, defunding immigration and customs enforcement. Asked in 2019 if she supported abolishing ICE, Harris replied, quote, "We've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing, and we need to probably think about starting from scratch," unquote. In an ACLU questionnaire, Harris boasted that she was, quote, "one of the first senators after President Trump was elected to advocate for a decrease in funding to ICE," unquote, and promised that as president she would slash ICE detentions by at least 50%. Number 7, health care for illegal migrants. During her 2019 campaign, Harris came out in favor of providing taxpayer-funded health care for illegal migrants, telling CNN, quote, "Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period," unquote. And in an ACLU questionnaire, she promised that this coverage would include gender transition surgery for migrants held in federal immigration detention. 8, decriminalizing drug possession. Asked by the ACLU, quote, "Will you support the decriminalization at the federal level of all drug possession for personal use?" Harris answered yes. Number 9, bailing out violent criminals, defunding the police, and letting felons vote. Harris raised money for a bail fund that would have put violent criminals back on the streets. Asked by CNN's Don Lemon whether, quote, "people who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, would they be able to vote?" Harris replied, "I think we should have that conversation." She also praised the defund the police movement. Number 10, mandatory gun buybacks. While running for president in 2019, Harris said at a gun safety forum in Las Vegas that she supported forcing owners of millions of so-called assault weapons to give them up, telling MSNBC, quote, "We have to have a buyback program and I support a mandatory buyback program," unquote. 11, court packing. In 2019, Harris was asked about the possibility of adding up to 4 seats on the Supreme Court. She said she was, quote, "open to this conversation," unquote. 2 months earlier, she told Political everything is on the table when it comes to the court. Number 12, proposing $46 trillion in new spending. Manhattan Institute budget expert Brian Riedel went through all of Harris's 2019 campaign pledges to see how much each of them cost. He found that she had proposed a mind-boggling $46 trillion in new government spending over a decade. A caveat: politicians are free to change their minds. Since taking these extreme stands, Harris has served 4 years as vice president. Perhaps she's grown in office and learned from hard experience, such as unleashing the worst border crisis in more than 100 years since the Mexican-American War, that her previous positions were deeply mistaken. But if she now recognizes she was wrong, then she needs to explain why she reversed course. It's not good enough to simply say, I won't ban fracking. What changed her mind, other than shale-rich Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes? She needs to explain why, after calling a border wall, quote, a monument standing in opposition not just to everything I value, but to the fundamental values upon which this country was built, unquote, she is now campaigning on a promise to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a wall and released a campaign ad featuring a portion of the wall that Trump built. It's one thing to change a position or two over time. It's another to abandon huge parts of what you campaigned on while simultaneously asserting that my values have not changed. That suggests that Harris's flip-flops are less out of principle and more out of concern that 47% plurality of voters say she is too liberal or progressive, according to the latest New York Times Siena College poll. And critically, which of Harris's 2019 positions is she actually abandoning? This is the first time since then that she has run on her own agenda, and she has not laid out a detailed 2025 platform. In most cases, the walkbacks of her 2019 positions are coming from unnamed aides. Sorry, but if Harris wants to disavow her own words and record, she needs to do it herself and give voters a clear reason for the change. Harris can't saddle Trump with positions he never took, while simultaneously expecting to be magically absolved of responsibility for every extreme position she has taken, including legislation she co-sponsored as a senator on the word of others. She's the one on the ballot, and until she explains otherwise, so is her Project 2019 agenda.
This was great. I love this. Really, I think this is great because I think it's clear and I think it lays out where she's been. Now, as you say, you can change your mind. I think she's given, let's put it this way, I don't believe her on fracking, but I also think that she at least responded to it. But what about the other 11 points that you mentioned here, which are, they are so on the fringe. And I want to underscore something else that I actually talked about with Pam, second Pam mention of the podcast. Until very recently, Pam was a staffer on the Hill for two and a half decades. And she said that of Senator Harris, they could not get her to do anything. They couldn't get her to jump on a bill, and they couldn't get her to co-sponsor a human trafficking bill. Right. So, human trafficking, that's okay. But then this extremist garbage, Bernie Sanders, Green New Deal nightmare, she's right up front signing her name onto those. Not that she ever actually introduced legislation of her own, because, she didn't do that. But she clearly showed her priorities on Capitol Hill. And that's why this is so important. Whereas, I'm sorry, I'm never going to read Project 2025 because I don't care what the priorities of the Heritage Foundation are.
No, I agree with you 100%. And look, when you campaign on an agenda and lay out a very detailed agenda that is going to be your platform of what you will do, and then you walk away from that, but then you sit down with Dana Bash on CNN and they ask you, what would you do on day one? And you can't answer the question?
Not that stuff.
Because it's not what I said before, not everything I ever campaigned on, but I haven't thought of what I'm going to do in 20. She hasn't laid out a 2025 agenda. She's campaigning on vibes. She's campaigning on joy. She's campaigning on hanging out with Oprah and all the celebrities on that in that ridiculous town hall that she did. But they asked, they during the town hall, two voters who they brought in for question asked her, how are you going to bring prices down? And she said, well, I grew up a middle-class kid and blah, 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 and started and didn't answer the question.
No.
One of the interesting
her
things.
Her answer was terrible.
Oh, it was awful. But it was all just word salad about, I'm middle class, I understand. And by the way, somebody on Fox went to the neighborhood in Montreal where she lived and all the mansions there. It was not a middle-class neighborhood in Montreal. She did not grow up in a middle-class neighborhood, but that's an aside. But, it's interesting. When I interviewed Trump, I said, and I'm not going to give away his answers, but I interviewed him and I said, so Harris couldn't answer what she would do on day one. And he said, yeah, she talked about her lawn. and I said, well, I'm going to ask you the same question that they asked Harris. What's your day one agenda? And he said, not one thing, but many things. And then he walked me through it. So for better or for worse, Donald Trump knows what he plans to do on the first day of his presidency. And most people, Americans, know what he wants to do because he's been president before. And so they have an idea of what he did as president and what he would do if he was reelected. And she's just trying to skate by under the wire without giving us any detail. She never campaigned for the primary. She never had to go in and do a debate with her Democratic opponents who would take apart her agenda. She never did any town halls with voters in New Hampshire and Iowa to answer these tough questions from undecideds. She's just assumed the Democratic nomination and is going to coast to Election Day without answering any tough questions on any of these things or laying out what she wants to do because, well, it's just the presidency. It's just, finger on the nuclear trigger. Nothing big here.
Well, I know. Well, I also don't know. We who live in Washington, we see this agenda of hers from 2019. We see the sort of very few things where she actually stuck her signature on something as a senator. And so we know very little. But one thing I am hearing is that the people who are making up her staff are people who were too radical for the Obama administration, people who barely got confirmed by Democratic senates because their views were so objectionable. First of all, extremely anti-Israel. The great minds behind the JCPOA. So just in my little world, I am extremely nervous about what these bright lights are going to be doing, because the one thing I'll say about Kamala Harris is I do think that instinctively she's on the far left, but I also think she's a follower. And for me, seeing the far left Tim Walz, remind me again you were a coach, and then tell me what you did during the Black Lives Matter protests, because I'm more interested in what you did as governor during the Black Lives Matter protests than I am in what you did as a coach, notwithstanding the fact that that's a very homey and warm thing to say.
I was the assistant coach of my son Max's squirt hockey team. So therefore, I want you to refer to me as coach from now on this podcast, okay?
I am going to refer to you as coach. Coach Squirt, is it?
No, Coach Mark. Thank you. And you don't even know anything about sports, so no one will ever mistake you for a coach.
Hey, I actually coached my daughter's soccer team when the team couldn't be together. I had to actually go out and buy sneakers for that. So nobody would mistake me.
They wear cleats in soccer, but yeah, good job, Daddy. Good job, Coach.
Well, no, the coach wears sneakers, to be fair.
Okay,
but I didn't even have.
Yes, and I have an inkling where you got your sneakers too, but we won't talk about that.
You can just call me governor. Anyway, but back to
your point.
Back to my point.
Yes,
but the point is, the people around her, yes, which is mine, the people around her are from the very far left. If I saw a phalanx of people who I thought were really solid Democrats, people from good offices on Capitol Hill and others from normal think tanks, Brookings, Carnegie, whatever, I would be a lot more comfortable than the people that she's got around her. And as a follower, I suspect that she's going to end up being just like Kamala of Project 2019.
Or worse. I mean, so here's the thing: that there's a nonpartisan whose name escapes me now, but I linked to it in my post column. There's a nonpartisan group that ranked her as not only the most left-wing United States senator to the left of Bernie Sanders, but the least bipartisan. She co-sponsored the fewest bipartisan bills of any senator. So that's where her baseline is. Okay. Then think about this: Joe Biden campaigned as a moderate, and what he really was a Trojan horse for the far left radicals who came in with his administration to implement all this left-wing, stuff. He did not govern as a centrist. He did not govern as a bipartisan. They got the idea, he could be a new FDR. And so they went far left.
That was his idea.
Because that's where the Democratic Party is. And so there's this is not the party of Bill Clinton. This is not the party of the era of big government is over. This is not the party of triangulation. This is not the party of abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. This is the party of radical leftism on climate, on abortion, on the economy, on tax. I mean, you name it across the board. This is a radical left party. And so when you had a moderate president, they naturally pulled him to the left. And you can see the results of that. Imagine if they have an actual leftist in there who just campaigned on vibes and claimed that she was a moderate, but really isn't and wants to go in that direction. She will get pulled so far left, this country will never recover from it. I mean, I think she needs to answer the question. Why did you change your position on this? Why did you change your position on that? At least voters have a right, however you're going to vote, voters have a right to know what actually you're going to do as president.
Yeah.
And right now, unless she can explain to us where she stands on each one of these issues, that's her agenda. That's what's on the ballot. I'm sorry, but you can't run away from your entire agenda and your entire record and every bill you co-sponsored simply by having some unnamed aide tell the New York Times she doesn't believe that anymore, and then have John Carl turn around and say, oh yeah, but she doesn't believe that anymore when Tom Cotton brings it up. And that's the other problem, is the media is just completely supine for her and is pushing this, she's moved to the center and she's not the Kamala Harris of 2019. Yeah, how do you know?
Yeah, they don't know.
And they don't
know.
Because the goal is to stop Donald Trump at all costs. And by the way, the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks is going to be freak out central because it's coming. They sense it. They think that the possibility that Donald Trump could win the presidency again is coming. It's starting to seem real, and people are freaking out. Let me tell you.
Well, I mean, I understand people freaking out, but I also think that part of the reason that people are freaking out is because they don't want their Democrats not to turn out. And you know what? Just as I am not enthusiastic about voting for Donald Trump, I imagine that many, many Democrats we know who are normal, principled people who believe in borders and who believe in healthcare and who believe in America are not people who are going to eagerly turn out for Kamala Harris. We shall see. Election day is not too far off.
My brother-in-law, who listens to every episode of our podcast, texted me the other day and he said, I miss Reagan Republicans as much as you miss normal Democrats. He's a Democrat.
Yes, I know. And yeah, I mean, look, we all miss what was, but the reality is parties move on. And as you always say, we do have a choice. I commend this article to absolutely everybody. We will put a link underneath the blurb of the podcast when it comes out. Go and read it and see if it does not shock you in the same way that it certainly shocked me. And take care.
Thanks for listening.
Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing us at whatthehell@aei.org.
Or you can reach us on Twitter. I'm at @dpletka.
And I'm at Mark Thiessen. That's Mark with a C.
Please rate and review the podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, share it, comment on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks for listening.